talking to Nate Sheets. He is running for Agriculture Commissioner. So let's get right to it. Nate, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's early this morning, but walk us through why Agriculture Commissioner.
All right. Well, good morning, Hannah, and good morning, East Texas. It's going to be a chilly one up here for us all today, so batten down the hatches. I decided to run for Ag Commissioner after I spent 30 years in the food business. And so I'm a fifth generation Texan, grew up down in Hayes County, went into the Navy to pay for college right after high school, and moved up to Dallas, where I met my lovely wife. And I had two things that happened that year right after we got married. One, I went on a mission trip that resulted in me going and raising support like a missionary and being in full-time Christian ministry for 12 years. But during that time, I also bought a beehive as a hobby and spent all that time when I was in ministry, just kind of had it on the side and started doing it full time in 2010. And today it became Nature Nate's, the largest number one branded honey in America. And so, I've been able to take a small agriculture industry and grow it and scale it to the very largest. And so today, with farmers and ranchers, the challenge that they have is they can't afford to be in business anymore. And that's why we have so many farmers that are selling out to data centers and wind farms and solar farms, just because every year they're upside down. In 1980, a farmer made 40 cents of $1 of food. That was their revenue, 40 cents. Today, it's 15 cents. So 60% less 40 years later. And yet all their input costs, like their labor and their diesel, their seed, their equipment, all of that's gone up 300%. So literally, farmers and ranchers are growing food for us, but they lose money every year doing it. And so, I want to be ag commissioner to be able to come in and help them be successful, not just survive, but thrive. And at the same time, ag's about food and clothing. And people are getting sick from the food that they eat. 90% of kids get their calories from ultra processed foods. 78% of kids 18 to 25 cannot serve in the military because of their health. And in Texas, the ag commissioner actually is responsible for feeding 5.5 million kids, and through the SNAP program and school lunch programs. And we are 44th in the nation in nutritional value for school lunch programs. So I'm jumping in this race because we need to help clean up the food. I like to say it this way: let's grow food better and grow better food.
You mentioned your time in the Navy. What was that experience like for you? And what do you think the lessons you learned during your time in service reflects into what you could do for this position?
I was raised. My dad was an Air Force colonel, and so I was raised growing up my whole life. My grandfather was the band director at Sherman High School for 55 years, and so I was raised with the mindset of service. When I went into the Navy, obviously I was going in to pay for college because I had to pay for college myself, but also to serve our country. And obviously, you learn discipline, you learn focus, but when I went into full-time Christian ministry, I was wanting to make an impact with my life for God's kingdom and use the skill sets that He had given me. And so serving communities around the world and here in Texas. And so, when I even started doing Nature Nates, I wanted to make a difference in the lives of other people. It just wasn't about making money. I focused on creating the best, highest quality honey by testing all the honey for herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, corn syrup, rice syrup, antibiotics twice. And so I wasn't willing to put honey on your family's table until I was willing to put it on my family's table. So I had at Nature Nates, I had that service mindset. And even now, I'm coming at this to be the ag commissioner with the mindset of serving Texans, serving farm and ranching families, but serving God's kingdom and wanting to make an impact in people's lives, doing the ag commissioner race or the ag commissioner position, and help everyone across Texas.
With Nature Nates, I know you could have gone any route with agriculture. Why bees?
I never intended to get into it. After Patty and I got married, we were living in Plano, Texas, and we lived in this little apartment. And we were talking. She's like, we're newlyweds. We need a hobby together. And I think she was thinking like, go scuba diving, maybe hang gliding, antiquing, gardening, jogging. But back then in 1996, they actually had TV commercials that showed what the internet was for. And they had this one TV commercial with this lady covered up in bees, and it said, "See, you can find anything on the internet." And I'd always loved honey my whole life. People would give me honey as a gift, and I was like, hmm. So I went over and typed in beekeeping Dallas, and up pulled North Dallas Honey Company. And I called this guy and I asked him, "Hey, can I buy a beehive?" And he said, "Sure." So I hang up and I realize, you know what? I live in an apartment. So I wind up calling my mom and dad who live down the road, asked them if I could put with this one beehive in their backyard. I fell in love with it. I mean, it's just I could talk to you for 2 hours about bees and the way that they operate. And but Fred, the guy I bought the one beehive from, he had started this little honey company in 1972, North Dallas Honey. He had 50 beehives just 2 miles away from where I lived, and then 50 down in Dallas. And he was in about 10 health food stores. And so on the weekends, I'd go over and work with him on the bees. He was 78 years old, had cancer but didn't know it, and had a hard time getting around. And so I started getting up 4 o'clock in the morning, putting honey on the shelves for him before I go to work. And then Patty was a school teacher at the time, so we started going down to his house at night and bottling honey by hand in his garage down in Dallas. And then I get up next morning at 4 a.m., go put honey on the shelf. And so in the summer of 1997, Fred and I had gone and bought a drum of honey from a local beekeeper, and he said, "Hey, why don't you buy the honey company?" I was like, "Buy the honey company? Why would I want to do that?" And I said, "How much do you want?" He said, $10,000. I said, "I don't have $10,000." And he goes, "Well, I'll finance it." So September 11th, oddly enough, 1997, I bought the honey business, but I didn't buy the bees. I bought the product side. So I hired a beekeeper up in Paris, Texas, Randy Johnson, Johnson Honey Company. And so I hired Randy to bottle the honey for me. And then I had a distributor to put it on the shelf. And so that whole time that I was in ministry, that's how the honey company ran. Go up to Paris every other weekend with a U-Haul trailer, pick up a few pallets of honey, bring it back to our house, unload it to the garage. I had an army of high school kids. We paid a penny a label to label the honey. And then I'd go get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go deliver it to my distributors. So, never intended to get into the honey business. It was not in my top 10 things to do. I'm not a multi-generational beekeeper. But I think it worked. And I'll tell you, whether it's honey or missions or anything, the way I approach it, I'm not an expert getting into anything. I just have an act of jumping in, learning as I go. But I think God's faithfulness has shown the results of the things that we did. Like even in ministry, we created this online evangelism platform called I Am Second, and it launched in 2008. And today, it's one of the most impactful online evangelism movements in the world. Over almost 500 million views of videos, and all types of celebrities and people sharing their stories of tragedy and heartbrokenness and sorrow, but discovering God and discovering the Lord in that. And so the I'm second because Christ is first in my life. Everybody's trying to be first. They all want to be number one, but God wants us to be second and have Christ first. And so we did that, in ministry. And so as I come into this ag commissioner position, I'm going to surround myself with people who are excellent at doing the things that they do. And I will lead with a servant's heart and lead people towards a vision of helping farmers and ranchers and cleaning up the food we eat.
In a recent article with D Magazine, it mentioned that you had a really tough time letting go of the honey business. Walk me through that crossroads that you found yourself with stepping down as CEO. What was it, back in 2024?
Yes. So it's when I never had any financial partners, and I always had a line of credit because I'd have to buy all my honey in the fall and use it all year round. And so I had a $30 million line of credit. We built our first bottling facility in 2013, and I was already spending $1 million a year having someone else bottle my honey for me. And so if I could do it for less than that, I'd make money. So we did that, and then in 2015, I bought a little honey company in Florida, built another plant in Georgia from the ground up, but that one was based on future capacity. And long story short, because Costco wanted a price reduction that year, right after I got that plant opened, we lost $4 million in 2017, and big. Big challenge. Banks are great partners when you're making money and doing well. They're not great partners when things go south. And so we struggled 17, 18, 19, hadn't really been able to make a profit. And then on my 50th birthday, I was sitting in a deer blind, crying out to God and just said, "Help me figure out what to do." And God just told me, "Act like you're not going to get a deal done." And I've been trying to bring in a financial investor because the bank was going to require that, to continue. And so we created a budget for 2020 based on $52 million, trying to get to a 15% EBITDA, which is your net income plus your taxes and depreciation. And So we had to lay off a bunch of people at the end of 2019, shut down the Georgia facility. But God's faithful, and in that 2020, we wound up not doing 52 million, but we did 72 million, and we didn't hit a 15% EBITDA. We hit a 19% EBITDA. So I was like, wow, God is great. And I got a call about 4 months later from a honey company that does industrial ingredient honey. So they do like General Mills and bottle Sam's Clubs, private label, things like that. And they said, hey, yeah, you want to sell? And as I started thinking about it, that $30 million line of credit is a little bit of an albatross, and it's hard to grow and fund growth when you get bigger. And I just couldn't organically fund it myself. And so I decided to sell, and I was the CEO until that November. And, so it was the timing was perfect. And I look back, and I mean, there's parts of it where I wish I would still had the honey company, obviously. But I look at where I am today, and I just see God's hands in it. And He was preparing me for this place that I'm pursuing, and was moving me out as the CEO to make me available to even be able to go run. And so it's so clear to me just to see God's hand and just guiding me along.
Now let's dive into your platform a little bit. On your website, it states that you support President Donald Trump's America's First trade policy. And we've seen a lot of farmers trying to balance that out since he's taken office again. Do you think these financial hiccups that some may be facing will subside once more trade deals are ironed out? How do you feel about that?
I do. I think the tariffs are exactly what we need to do going into the current into the future. When I was in the honey business, I was allowed to buy honey from Mexico, but Mexico wouldn't let me sell honey in Mexico. I could buy honey from Europe, but I couldn't sell honey in Europe. I own Nature Nates in Australia still, and so I'm very familiar, with international trade. And there are countries that have protectionistic trade policies to protect their agriculture. And unfortunately, in America, agriculture historically has been a geopolitical negotiating tool. And the Texas or all American farmers are the ones that take the major hits when they're negotiating, like China and the soybean issue that we just dealt with. And so I think President Trump views the tariffs as the one tool that he can use to really start to help compensate farmers for that impact of being the bargaining chip. But long term, I think we're going to see a dramatic impact of those tariffs, not just in agriculture, but even as all consumers, because I think his ultimate goal is probably to be able to lower income tax as we start to replace that with tariffs.
Now, what do you say to farmers, Texas farmers specifically, about those who may be concerned with just the state of the U.S. trade market right now?
The greatest need that a farmer and rancher has today is to be able to make more revenue. If they can make more revenue, make more profit, what they have lost are options. If all of a sudden you lost 100,000 or 200,000 or $300,000 last year. I was just talking to a rice farmer. He farmed 6,000 acres down in Beaumont. He was headed to go sell his rice crop for 40% less than it actually cost him to make it. So 40%. I mean, who can afford to do that year over year? And so if all of a sudden they can't afford to be in business next year, now they've got, all this land, and someone comes in and says, hey, I'll give you $10,000 an acre. Man, they're going to jump on that because they don't have kids that want to come in behind them and be farmers and watch their parents. They watch their parents struggle. Why would kids want to do it? So we don't have young people coming in. The average age of a farmer is about 61, and they're financially upside down. And so the greatest thing we can do is help them be able to access markets, access consumers, and sell more products to more people all across America. And we're going to do that by taking the Go Texan program, which is a program that's created by the Texas Department of Agriculture to be able to sell products to consumers to get into grocery stores. But unfortunately, we don't have anyone at the TDA that has any food in grocery store distribution experience. And so it has wound up looking like a children's elementary school fundraising program. It's got scented candles on it, healing crystal earrings and bracelets, things that have nothing to do with agriculture. So we're going to go create the Grow Texan program, and we're going to go to retailers, and we're going to create an in-store robust platform where they can go in and do distribution, just like I did when I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, put honey on the shelf. And then we'll also connect them with consumers directly through a digital platform like an Amazon. And so you don't have to live near a HEB or a Walmart or a Kroger, United, to be able to go put product on the shelf. You can sell it anywhere. But that brings us to the next level of challenge that we have in agriculture is that we've lost all the processing capacity in America. If you think about China and the most favored nation status that we had with China back in the 70s and the 80s, we saw all of our manufacturing go overseas. So we've been totally reliant upon China for the past 40 or 50 years to manufacture products that were sold in America. So we have a president who sees that as a national security issue. So he's onshoring manufacturing in America, whether it's chips, the data chips, or whether it's automobiles, or whether it's steel. All these things that have gone off, we're bringing them back. I look forward to working with President Trump. So to look at the food supply chain and bring back food processing that we can onshore back into America, that all of a sudden gives optionalities to a producer. In the 1970s, we had 700 meat processing plants all across Texas. 700. Today, we have 4 meat packing companies that control 85% of the market across the United States. And so a rancher doesn't have the option to really go down and have his cows slaughtered and then go sell steaks. He has to go sell to these big 4 meat packers. But the same thing's true with cotton. We used to have a textile mill in West Texas where 40% of the cotton of the world is grown. We had a textile mill for blue jeans, but we've lost that. Now there's 2 textile mills in America over on the East Coast. So go think about each one of the agriculture commodity sectors and think about what are the processing facilities that we need to onshore, which then gives farmers the ability to process their own products and ultimately sell them to consumers directly. And so I look forward to working with President Trump and Secretary Rollins in trying to figure out what we can bring back to help bring food security, because food security is national security.
That brings me to my next point. You also are a big supporter of the Make America Healthy Again movement. Your website says that you want to help our state's producers grow the cleanest food possible, and it also states that you want to ensure that we're fueling our kids' bodies and developing brains with the cleanest food. What are your plans to achieve this?
Yes. So again, we're 44th in the nation in the school nutrition program. And so obviously we need to reimagine, because what my current opponent and the current commissioner has done has not worked. One of his very first actions that he did when he became the ag commissioner was to have Cupcake Friday and symbolizing the freedom of bringing snacks and fryers and sodas back into the school system. But the result is, here 12 years later, 78% of kids 18 to 25 cannot serve in the military because of their health. The obesity rates, half of kids are clinically obese. 1/3 of kids under 16 have diabetes. I mean, it's the impact on our youth and from food is dramatic. So we're going to get in there. The top 10 states in the country in nutritional value all have gardens attached to all levels of schools. So we'll be looking at bringing gardens back in, teaching kids about health and nutrition and food and cooking, so they truly understand what fuels their body. And because how does a kid go perform well in school if he's just eating sugary Fruit Loops for breakfast in school? And the SNAP program, which is part of USDA, which also funds the program for the Texas for the school lunch program. They have revamped it to where you can't go buy sodas and candy anymore through the SNAP program, but they've incentivized people to go use and buy organic vegetables and produce by having double bucks to be able to do that. And so we're going to take that same mindset into the school lunch program and really focus on cleaning that up so we can ensure that that kids can be not just healthy but productive when it comes to their education. And we're going to list. Governor Abbott says that he wants to be first in the country in education. Well, then we've got to reimagine and rethink how we feed our kids to be able to achieve that.
I want to to bring up a point, and just to get some clarity here, even for our viewers, you also mentioned that you want to combat agro-terrorism as a big priority for you. What exactly is that for those who may not know?
Yeah, I mean, so we've arrested three Chinese nationals that have tried to sneak into America, a blight and a worm, things that you can inject into our agriculture system that will devastate. For instance, right now we have the pasture mealybug. We've got 20 counties down on the Gulf Coast that are quarantined. And for the first time ever, this pasture mealybug has come in and it's attacking the coastal hay, the Bermuda, the St. Augustine, all grasses and killing it. And so that the only other place that that is found is in Australia. So we have a biosecurity platform in Texas Department of Agriculture to ensure and that we inspect things like nurseries or inbound trucks into Texas. But again, unfortunately, we have an ag commissioner that doesn't understand the level of importance of things like looking at a nursery. We have about 280 class 4 nurseries, which are large nurseries of 20 acres or more that are really wholesalers that sell to the retailers. So out of those, I think it's 280, there's about 120 of them, about 40%, that have not been inspected in the past 4 years. So when we think about the pasture mealybug or other things that come into Texas, and the Texas Department of Agriculture is supposed to be the first line of defense, and yet they don't understand the importance of that. Also truck scales, another thing. Farmers get paid by weight. So you drive a truck on a scale, they weigh it, it drives off the scale, then they come back empty and weigh it, and it's the difference between that is how they get paid. We've got 4,700 scales in Texas. About 1,800 of those scales have not been inspected in the past 4 years. And so the biggest issue farmers have today is revenue. And the one tool that's already in place isn't being ensured that it's working properly to make sure that even with what they're making today and losing money on, that they're not losing far more than they could or should lose. And so, when you think about agro-terrorism, there's intentionality of people trying to come in and damage our food supply, like going down and, throwing something in our water system. Obviously, that's an easy thing for someone to be able to do. And we always hear about the inbound hacking, from a computer standpoint. We hear in the news all the time, oh, the Chinese hackers or the North Korean hackers or, the Nigerian hackers. Well, it's just not our software platforms that they're going after. They're also going after our food supply, because if you're in a battle, one of the ways that you win is you cut off the supply line to your enemy and they starve out. And so we just need to think about our food supply chain like that. That's why bringing food processing back to America is so important, because we're reliant upon our adversaries to help feed us. And we've been down blowing up, fentanyl boats down in the Gulf of America, praise the Lord. But we don't think about our food in that same manner and trying to think, well, if they're doing it by trying to sneak drugs into America, why wouldn't they do it by trying to put those same things in our food and coming into America?
All right, there you go. To wrap up our conversation, is there anything else you want our viewers to know about you in this position that you're running for?
Yeah, I think we have an incredibly unique campaign, maybe the only one that's ever been like it, because we have people coming in, getting on board that are on opposite sides of the fence on many, many issues. And I have had comment after comment of, it's insane. All the people that are against each other are behind you in the same campaign, ranging from we just got endorsed by Governor Abbott a couple of days ago because he sees that we have to have a change. In his words, we cannot have criminality and unethical behavior in the Texas Department of Agriculture like we have had over the past 12 years. We need that cleaned up. We have Senator Charles Perry, who is the chairman of the Senate Ag Committee. He has endorsed this and he's kind of the top ag guy in Texas. And so he knows that we have to have a change in Texas. And we've gotten all the grassroots out in, East Texas. We have Joanne Fleming with Grassroots We the People out of Tyler. Joanne's endorsed us personally, as well as the Grassroots We the People. But also we have like Make Texans Healthy Again Coalition. And we have other, kind of MAHA focused groups. Moms Across America, Zen Honeycutt named us the health person of the year. And so those types of partnerships that are coming together see the sense of urgency that all Texans have, that we can't afford another 4 years of Sid Miller in the Texas Department of Agriculture. And that's why Nate Sheets is running for Ag Commissioner. That's why we need you and all of your listeners to get behind us. You can go to natesheets.com, natesheets.com, or go follow us on our social media. But we're getting inside that window. February 17th is right around the corner. And so we need, if you believe that we've got to have a difference in Texas, then we need you and your listening audience to go out, follow us, and tell all their friends, and let's make an impact for the betterment of Texas farmers, ranchers, and all families.
Well, thank you again, Nate, for joining us this morning and just giving us more
Hannah, thanks for
information
having
about your
me.
name. Of course, anytime. All right, there you go. Again, voting starts March 3rd. Again, early voting February 17th. We can find more details about this conversation and more about Nate over at kltv.com and ktri.com.